Thank you so much, Counselor, for taking the time to speak with us today. We're thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to participate. Thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. So as you know, August 26th marks the 95th anniversary of the 19th Amendment.
Indeed.
And the 44th anniversary of Women's Equality Day. And as a champion of women and girls, we thought that you were particularly appropriate to interview in honor of this day. Voting was always viewed by the suffragettes as really the gateway to progress. Unfortunately, it took women a long time to catch up in terms of voting numbers. Until 1986, we've just now since then had more women voters than male. And while the number of women voting has risen dramatically in recent decades, we still haven't seen that similar rise in women's representation. As the first woman of color and the first woman in 30 years to top the ticket in Massachusetts, why do you think we still haven't come close to achieving gender parity?
Well, I mean, obviously not enough women are running. Not enough women are running and winning. But ultimately, it's about informing the aspiration. We are talking about women, but all women begin as girls. And in order to be it, as the cliche saying goes, you must first see it. And so it becomes, a vicious cycle, if you will. The aspiration is not being informed.
Right.
And then when there are girls who grow up to be women who have that aspiration, they often don't get the support necessary in order to be successful. People use the word support very loosely, but it's important that we recognize that support is a verb. It is an action. And so anyone who says they support the cause of gender parity and representation and wants a government that is reflective of the people and the citizenry that it represents and serves in gender, in orientation, socioeconomic status, race, and culture. Everyone has a role to play in that. So the responsibility of informing that inspiration and of mentorship and of investment in the realization of that is not just left to girls, it's not just left to women, it's not just left to girls serving organizations, it's not just left to our schools. This is the responsibility of everyone.
Right. It's on all of us.
It is on all of us. There is a collective responsibility, and the fact that we have not achieved gender parity in government is a collective failure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree with you. I read this earlier this year. In your interview with Boston Magazine, you mentioned that you still feel like the underdog and that's really what keeps you from being complacent. Is this something that you've found with other women colleagues, and why do you think this serves as your motivation when it could easily be a deterrent?
My revealing that I characterize myself and still feel very much like an underdog, I think that was a rare sharing. And so when I hear you say that, I'm sort of reacting because I'm like, I said that, I admitted that, and I have to tell you the truth. I think that people could hear that and think it's some sort of contrived humility, and maybe even question how real that is. I'm in an office looking at pictures of me with my former colleague John Kerry, and at events with the First Lady of the United States of America and panel discussions with Gloria Steinem and Lilly Ledbetter. It is surreal. The truth is a confluence of things made it possible for me to arrive at this very moment. I am humbled, I'm grateful, and I feel a tremendous sense of responsibility to all those variables, beginning with my shero, my mother, God rest her soul, that made it possible for me to arrive at this moment. So that underdog feeling, I think, is positive. If I'm always uncomfortable and I continue to make other people uncomfortable, which I also think is important, that's not a calculus by me. I don't sort of set out to make people uncomfortable, but I know that the issues that I work on, human trafficking and domestic violence and sexual assault, and sobering conversations about disparities in health and wealth inequality and quality of life in this city. Acknowledging that I'm a survivor of sexual violence. All these things do make people uncomfortable. So I'm okay with that because I do believe that ultimately that's how progress is realized. You have to have a willingness to make people uncomfortable. So I am willing to feel uncomfortable so that I'm never complacent and that I continue to be vigilant in this work to advance a social justice and a social and economic justice agenda to break cycles of poverty and violence and reduce trauma in our communities, and to unapologetically champion the cause of girls and women.
And that's actually a perfect transition into my next question, which is your first official action as city councilor was to create and chair the Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Communities. And I have to say, it felt very intentional to me that you put women both at the first, but also that you included it at all. You could say families and communities, but you chose to put women there. Can you tell me a little bit about that choice and why women at the center? Do you think it speaks to something bigger? Where was that choice coming from?
So first I want to say I am incredibly proud to have established that Standing Policy Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Communities. It has been replicated by, at least that we're aware of at this point, 2 other municipalities, both in Pennsylvania and also in Rhode Island. The reason I established the committee was to, one, highlight that the health of the individual, the family, and the community are inextricably linked, and that our destinies are tied. And I named women in that because, to be honest, I'd gotten a lot of flack for my emphasis on women and girls. And this is my way of highlighting that our destinies are tied, and that my advocacy on behalf of women and girls is not to the exclusion of anyone or anything else. The impetus for me, my heart's work, is the acknowledgement of my own life experience that broken girls have an increased likelihood of growing up to be broken women. And I don't believe, I know, as a city and as a commonwealth, we can't afford that. There but for the grace of God go I. I experienced great trauma and dysfunction and many destabilizing determinants in my own life. And I know the trajectory my life could have gone. And so I wanted to put women at the fore because that is my heart's work. It's uncomfortable to say that was my platform because it really is just an extension of the work I've been doing really my entire life. The true strength and value of a government that is diverse is to have a diversity of perspective, opinion, and thought represented. Without that cognitive diversity, those different lenses and life experiences and voices around these tables of power, these corridors of power and influence, it means that the issues that are raised will be raised through a completely monolithic and homogenized prism. And that means that not only will the issues raised be limited, which is to the detriment of everyone, but also how you approach those issues will be limited. So I never wanted to run away from my heart's work, from my platform, from my value, from my identity politic. And I do have to say that I think very often women get elected and then feel that they will be marginalized or stereotyped and don't want to be the woman speaking up for women. They're worried about that. If not you, then who? When I walk into a room and someone, I think I've done my job if I'm walking into a room and people, sort of give me a look that's like, here she comes again on this, she's gonna come banging her drum. To me, that means I'm on message. I won't allow anyone to marginalize or narrow or pigeonhole me because I know the interplays and the overlays with those issues that disproportionately impact women and girls and what that impact is on all of us. And that ultimately, if you are truly committed to the stabilization of family, to the health of community, to the advancement and well-being of us all, then you have to have a pointed interest on women and girls. And that means gender-specific and responsive programming and policies and protocols. And that's what I've been striving to do in my 6-year tenure on the council, which is to bring a unique lens, a strength of perspective, and of conviction around these issues. And I have to say, my male colleagues have been embracing of this agenda. The fact that these issues were not previously raised or confronted was not from a place of malice. It was from a lack of perspective. And my colleagues and men in this city, and women alike every day, thank me for what I'm doing for their mothers, for their daughters, for their sisters. So.
Absolutely. Our government has to look like us to reflect us, right? It has to work both ways.
Absolutely.
So. And I would really love, I'm glad that you brought up sort of men and making sure, talking about it being, it's about an embrace. It's not about saying instead of. And
exactly.
So, right?
It's and.
It is. It
not
is and.
Or.
It's the recognition.
It is and, not or.
Absolutely. And so I realized this, I thought about it when I saw that in honor of Women's History Month in March earlier this year, that you and Councilwoman Wu honored past women of the council, because you said that the Great Hall on the 5th floor, that school children come in and say, where are all the women?
Yes.
Where are they? And I was struck by Maureen Feeney, the second woman ever elected to the council, said, and I quote, "I think we brought a different dimension and a different perspective. The fact that there were 4 of us made us a force to be reckoned with. I'd like to think we had an impact on the council," end quote. So I was really struck by that because, one, that there were 4 women on the council at one point, and that, how
and they were all elected together, actually. So they were in the same class.
1994. And what does that mean to you, for example, and Councilwoman Wu?
So let me just say this. It's no, gender is no different than when you're talking about race. Everyone carries their own unconscious bias. And I do believe that there's unconscious bias when it comes to gender and sexism. So no, do I feel daily confronted by blatant, offensive marginalization as a woman on this body? I can't say that I do. Are there things in my daily comings and goings as I traverse this city, subtleties, more overt things that occur that I believe point to my gender? Certainly. If I were to think of something more obvious that has happened, when I ran for the council for the first time in 2009, I was the only woman running in that field of 15 candidates. And in public and private, I was regularly asked if I was married. I was single and unmarried. And people were quite comfortable to ask me if I was gay. As the only woman in that field, I do not believe that, I could be wrong, but that the other candidates were asked as often as I was about my marital status. And that is the sort of bias that occurs. A dear friend, I like to call her my sister in stilettos in service, Linda Dorsina Forey, who served in the state legislature here for 8 years and then was recently elected to the state senate. She has 4 children. She was running for a seat that had been held by an Irish Catholic man who's served the district well, and I think he might have 6 children. I'm not sure of the approximate number, but he has many children.
Sure, he's a family man.
Exactly, and no one had ever asked how would he do the job.
Yes.
But people asked Linda Dorsina Forey, who had already been in the legislature for 8 years, how would she manage a higher office and seat with 4 children. So these are still the sort of biases that we see play out. And again, I don't think it comes from a place of malice.
Sure, it's of not knowing.
Exactly.
And curiosity sometimes.
Exactly. And I was married a year ago, a year and a couple of months ago. Thank you so much. And before I was married, so many people asked me, I hope you're not going to be, I hope you'll still remain as hungry and
Interesting.
as present, and because they had all these connotations in their minds about what happens when someone in public life, a woman, gets married, and they wanted to make sure that I was still going to work hard. So these are,
Wow. No, that's really helpful, I think, for young women to hear that are considering running or that feel daunted by the task. I think it's helpful to see that someone as accomplished and as confident as yourself experienced it and said, you know what, it's not from a place of malice. Yeah. I'm going to tell you what it's about, but it's not, and we can work together.
Yeah,
so I
absolutely.
think it's incredibly important. I would love to ask, if you don't mind, you were awarded earlier this year the Gabby Giffords Rising Star Award from Emily's List, which is a huge honor.
Pretty surreal.
Yes, huge honor. And one of my favorite tweets from the night that I followed was from businesswoman Meredith Feynman, who said, quote, or tweet, my biggest takeaway from hashtag Emily's List 30 was that Ayanna Pressley should be CEO of Earth.
Oh my goodness.
So
I'll start with my house. Let me make sure my husband sees that too.
Yeah, wonderful compliment. Your incredible personal story, you've mentioned a little bit about your experience in college, and it clearly resonated with the audience that night. You spoke to them. So what would you say to what would you say to a woman who is considering running or has thought about it but doesn't really feel like she has that powerful personal story? What might you say to her?
I mean, this is what's incredible about politics and public service. Everyone's qualified. I've been very fortunate and worked hard to be in some rarefied spaces, having worked for John Kerry, our Secretary of State, when he was a United States Senator for 11 years, and before that for Congressman Joseph P. Kennedy II, who's since retired, and on numerous campaigns. It was an incredible political education. I do believe those experiences have better equipped me for what I do. They don't qualify me. What qualifies me are my life experiences, my struggles, my triumphs. I think those experiences make me more empathetic, more deliberate, and more intentional. I love that you used that word earlier about my placing women at the fore of my Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Communities, because that's a word I use every day, that we have to be intentional.
Yes.
That change doesn't just happen. It's not organic. We have to be intentional about ushering in cultural shifts that ultimately result in institutional, sustainable, meaningful change. So what I would tell these women is, of course, you're qualified. You may not feel ready. And there are a number of resources available to you to support you in that. But you already are qualified, and your story is powerful because it's yours. And although it is your truth, you can rest assured that it is the truth and life experience shared by millions. And when you can liberate yourself to stand fully in that truth, I think it's Audre Lorde who said that when we liberate ourselves, we liberate others. I love Audre Lorde. I hope that's the correct quote. Look it up.
I will. Okay, we'll check it.
So you're qualified. You may not feel ready, but you can get there.
Absolutely.
Your story is powerful because it's yours, and it's your personal truth, but it's likely a truth shared by many. And in a world where, in so many ways, I think people are searching for meaning, what the electorate wants to know is that people in the halls of government are real.
Like them. They reflect
exactly.
them. They understand them. Absolutely.
Real.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is just get out of your own way. We can recycle and recite the statistics and how sobering our paltry numbers are, and how much work that has to be done for us to achieve real parity. We can talk about systemic and institutionalized barriers and cultural barriers that are very real. But I know that we are often our biggest barrier. And it's because we don't believe we know enough, we're smart enough, we're good enough. and we don't operate with the same sense of entitlement. I don't think that has to be a bad word. That our male counterparts often do.
Sure.
So get out of your own way.
That's fantastic. I know that you're one of the founding board members
Yes.
of Emerge Massachusetts, and we've often interviewed other women. I've interviewed other women in elected office who have said that politics is a lonely business for those who go first. Amongst your many responsibilities and your role as counselor, what types of things have you sort of thought through, or a plan of succession, of thinking through bringing those other women along with us, right? What may you have put in place or thought about even for the future of putting that in place?
I think that's the work every day. You know, how do you ensure and hold yourself accountable to intentionally lifting as you climb? And again, you have to be intentional about it, because the work is all-encompassing, all-consuming. It has been the greatest challenge of my life, but continues to yield the greatest reward, to be the most fulfilling.
That's good to
I
hear.
still think there is no more nobler endeavor that one could pursue. I am so blessed. I get to actualize my values every day. Very few people in the world can say that. So it is a daunting, as you referenced earlier, task and endeavor, but one well worth it. And it's so, that work of diversifying the pipeline, of building a bench, that was the work that I did long before I was a candidate, and that's the work that I'll continue to do. And not only informing that aspiration for girls, but might I add, activism and consciousness doesn't have a shelf life. I don't want us to forget about the more mature women. A lot of women are doing career shifts, mid-career, midlife career shifts. And one of the things that I think women do so well, and why we're great leaders, is that they do use and draw upon the totality of their experience.
Yes, and they have a unique perspective.
Absolutely, but they draw on the totality of their experience. And so I want to continue to inform the aspiration of young girls to want to run. I want to continue to support women when they do run. And I want to, for those who've never had the aspiration, even as grown women, it's not too late. Inform that for them, because I might see something in them that they don't see in themselves that would contribute greatly to the political discourse and to the halls of government. And of course, there are those other things that we have to address. It's challenging, more challenging for women to raise money. People, question how viable they are, and so, for that, absolutely. And to your point about it can be very lonely being the first, I would just say that I was aware that if I was elected, I would be the first woman of color elected in the history of the council. But that is not why I ran. I don't think there's anything redeeming about setting out to make history. In fact, most people who have made history did not set out to make history. I just wanted to make a difference. Now, when I realized upon my electoral victory that I had in fact made history, that did not make me puff my chest out. Perhaps it should have. What I just felt immediately was responsibility. So it is a blessing to be the first, but it does come with its own unique burden.
Sure.
Which doesn't have to be a bad thing. I don't mind feeling a little heavy, because like I said, I want to be uncomfortable. I want to continue to feel the underdog. I never want to get too comfortable. I never want to be complacent. But it is a unique position to be in, to be the first something.
Thank you so much for your time. We've so appreciated talking to you today, and it's been wonderful. I'm sure so many women will appreciate hearing your insights from sitting in the chair in City Hall. From
Sitting in the chair, exactly.
In the chair, intentionally, every day.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you for the opportunity.